I never thought silence could be so loud. For months, every phone call with my son felt like trying to hold water in my hands. Something was slipping away, but I couldn't quite see what. His voice sounded hollow, like he was calling from the bottom of a well instead of just across town. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself he was just busy with work, stressed about life, going through a phase. But a mother knows. Deep in my bones, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong until Mrs. Henderson from next door rang my doorbell on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a cream-colored envelope with my son's name on it. "Mary, I'm so sorry," she said, her face flushed with embarrassment. "This was delivered to my house by mistake. I think it's something important." I thanked her and closed the door, staring at the envelope. It was thick cardstock, expensive looking. The kind of thing you send for weddings or major announcements. My hands trembled as I opened it, telling myself it was probably nothing. Maybe he was throwing a party. Maybe it was an invitation to something fun. Then I read the words inside. "Farewell celebration for Daniel Thompson's move to Singapore." Singapore. The word burned itself into my brain. Singapore. That's on the other side of the world. That's not across town or even across the country. That's a 14-hour flight away. That's a different hemisphere, different time zone, different everything. And he never told me. My son was moving across the world, and I was finding out from a card that wasn't even meant for me. I stood in my entryway for what felt like hours, staring at those words until they blurred. The card listed a date for the party. It had happened 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. He'd already had his goodbye celebration. He'd probably already left. I called his number with shaking fingers. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "You've reached Daniel. Leave a message." That same flat, distant voice I'd been hearing for months suddenly made perfect sense. He'd been saying goodbye without saying goodbye. He'd been pulling away because he was already gone. I was 63 years old, and I thought I'd built a life where this kind of pain couldn't reach me anymore. I'd raised Daniel by myself after his father died when he was only 7. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I'd been there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every triumph. I'd sacrificed vacations, new clothes, home repairs, anything that wasn't essential so he could have opportunities one never did. And now he was on the other side of the world, and he hadn't even told me he was leaving. The phone call that changed everything came 3 days later. 3 days of me leaving increasingly desperate voicemails, sending texts that went unanswered, existing in a fog of hurt and confusion that made everything feel surreal. When my phone finally rang and his name appeared on the screen, I almost dropped it. "Mom." His voice was tight, defensive. He already knew why I was calling. "Singapore." I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. "You moved to Singapore and you didn't tell me?" There was a long pause. In that silence I could hear everything he wasn't saying, the guilt, the justification he was preparing, the distance he'd already put between us. "I was going to tell you," he said finally. I knew you'd make it into a big thing." A big thing. My son moving to the other side of the world was a big thing. The fact that I had to find out from a misdirected card was a big thing. But in his mind, my feelings about it were an inconvenience he'd decided to avoid. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Before you got on the plane? After you landed? Christmas." "Mom, don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic." Those 3 words hit me like a slap. I'd heard them before, over the past year or so, whenever I'd tried to express concern about how distant he'd become. "Don't be dramatic. Don't make this about you. Don't guilt-trip me." As if a mother wanting to know what was happening in her son's life was somehow manipulative. "I'm not being dramatic, Daniel. I'm trying to understand why my only child moved across the world without telling me." "It's a career opportunity," he said, his voice taking on that lecturing tone he'd developed recently. "The company offered me a position in their Singapore office. It's a promotion. I couldn't pass it up." "When did they offer it to you?" Another pause. 6 months ago. 6 months. For half a year, he'd known he was leaving, and he'd said nothing. 6 months of phone calls where he'd let me ramble about my garden, about the book club I joined, about Mrs. Henderson's cat, while he held this massive secret. 6 months of lying by omission every single day. "I don't understand," I said, and I could hear my voice breaking. Why would you keep this from me? Because I knew you'd react like this, he snapped. I knew you'd make it all about you and how I'm abandoning you, and I didn't want to deal with it while I was trying to prepare for the biggest career move of my life. I have never. I started, but he cut me off. You're always so needy, Mom. Every phone call is about what you're doing, what you need, how lonely you are. I needed space to focus on my own life for once. The words landed like physical blows. Needy. That's what he thought of me. The woman who'd raised him alone, who'd worked herself to exhaustion to give him a better life, who'd celebrated every one of his achievements like they were miracles. I was needy because I wanted to stay connected to my son. I'd grown up in a small town in Indiana, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and family meant everything. My own mother had lived 3 blocks away until she passed, and we'd had coffee together almost every morning. That was normal to me. Family staying close, being involved in each other's lives. When I married Daniel's father, Tom, we'd built our life with that same expectation. Family dinners every Sunday, holidays together, being present for the big moments and the small ones. When Tom died, that expectation didn't change, it intensified. Daniel was all I had left. Not in a possessive way, but in a simple, factual way. He was my family, my only family, and I devoted every ounce of energy I had to making sure he grew up feeling loved, supported, and secure. He'd been such a sweet child. Sensitive, thoughtful, always drawing pictures for me, or saving his allowance to buy me flowers on Mother's Day. When he went to college, we'd video chatted every Sunday evening. When he graduated and got his first job, he'd asked me to help him apartment hunt. We'd been close. Or at least I thought we were close. Looking back now, I could see when things started to shift. It was about 3 years ago, right after he started dating Melissa. She was polished, ambitious, came from money, the kind of woman who had opinions about everything and expected those opinions to be treated as facts. I tried to like her. I'd invited them both to dinner, asked about her work, complimented her style. But she'd looked at my little house, the house I'd poured my heart into maintaining on a limited budget, like it was beneath her. Daniel tells me you call him every week, she'd said once, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's so sweet. The way she said sweet made it clear she meant something else. Something like pathetic or clingy. After that, Daniel's calls became less frequent. First, he'd call every other week. Then once a month. Then only when I called him first. And when we did talk, he seemed distracted, eager to get off the phone. I tried to bring it up once gently, and he'd accused me of guilting him. Now here we were. He was in Singapore, and I was finding out from a stranger's misdirected card. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said quietly into the phone. I never meant to be a burden to you. I didn't say you were a burden, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I just need you to understand that I'm an adult with my own life. I can't always put your feelings first. I never asked you to put my feelings first. I just asked you to tell me you were moving to Singapore. And now you know, he said. Look, I have to go. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Daniel, I'll call you next week, okay? We can talk more then. But I knew we wouldn't. Next week would come and go, and he'd be busy with his new job, his new life, his new everything. I'd become a voice from his past that he occasionally felt obligated to acknowledge. Okay, I said. I love you. Yeah. Bye, Mom. He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat on my couch in the house I'd lived in for 35 years, the house where Daniel had learned to walk, where he'd played with action figures in the living room, where I'd packed his lunches and checked his homework and bandaged his scraped knees, and I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Over the next few weeks, I tried to make sense of it. I replayed every conversation we'd had over the past 6 months, looking for clues I'd missed. That time he'd mentioned his company was expanding internationally. Had that been a hint? That conversation where he'd seemed uncomfortable when I'd asked about visiting him for Thanksgiving. Had he already known he'd be gone by then? I called my friend Patricia, who'd been my closest confidant since we'd met at a widow support group 15 years ago. She listened to the whole story, making sympathetic noises in all the right places. What I don't understand, I said, is why he felt he couldn't tell me. Did I do something wrong? Was I really that overbearing? Mary, Patricia said firmly, you are one of the least overbearing people I know. You gave that boy everything. If he can't appreciate that, that's on him, not you. But he said I was needy. He said I always make things about me. That's guilt talking, Patricia said. He knows he did something wrong, and he's trying to make it your fault, so he doesn't have to feel bad about it. Classic deflection. I wanted to believe her, but doubt had already taken root. Maybe I had been too clingy. Maybe my weekly phone calls were too much. Maybe I'd held on too tight without realizing it. After all, I'd only had one child. I didn't have any basis for comparison. Maybe other mothers backed off more, gave their adult children more space. Maybe I'd crossed boundaries without knowing they existed. I started going through old photos, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. There was Daniel at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. There he was moving into his college dorm, looking excited and nervous at the same time. There we were at his college graduation, and he'd thanked me in his speech for being the best mom anyone could ask for. When had that stopped being true? When had I gone from being the best mom to being needy? The answer I realized was Melissa. I pulled up Daniel's Instagram account, something I rarely did because I didn't want to be one of those mothers who monitored their adult children's social media. But now I scrolled back through the past 3 years looking for patterns. They were everywhere. Photos of Daniel and Melissa at expensive restaurants with captions about adulting and the good life. Pictures from tropical vacations I hadn't known about. Check-ins at wine bars and art galleries and rooftop lounges. And in the comments, always the same friend group. Young professionals with impressive job titles and carefully curated aesthetics. People who wore designer clothes and took international trips and talked about investments in real estate. I scrolled further and found the farewell party. There were at least 30 people there, all dressed in cocktail attire, holding champagne glasses and toasting my son. Melissa was in almost every photo, her arm possessively around Daniel's waist, her smile bright and proprietary. The caption on one photo read, "New adventures await. So proud of my ambitious man. Singapore won't know what hit it. Hashtag expat life, hashtag power couple, hashtag next chapter." Not a single mention of family. Not a single photo of me, though my picture used to be in his apartment. I'd seen it the last time I'd visited on his bookshelf, a frame I'd given him with a photo of the two of us from his college graduation. I wondered if it was packed in a box now, or if he'd left it behind deliberately. I kept scrolling and found another post from 2 weeks after the party. It was a photo of Daniel and Melissa standing in front of what looked like a modern apartment building, all glass and steel and contemporary design. The caption read, "Home sweet home. Our new place in Singapore is everything. Hashtag expat life, hashtag living the dream, hashtag new beginnings, our place. Our new place." Melissa had moved with him. The realization hit me like a truck. Not only had Daniel moved to Singapore without telling me, but his girlfriend, the woman who'd never quite managed to hide her disdain for me, had moved with him. They were building a life together on the other side of the world, and I hadn't been deemed important enough to know about it. I thought about all the times Melissa had made subtle digs. The way she'd suggested Daniel was too attached to his hometown. The way she'd rolled her eyes when I'd mentioned wanting to host Thanksgiving. The comment she'd made about how some people never learn to let go. At the time, I'd brushed them off as quirks of her personality. Now I saw them for what they were. A campaign to separate my son from me. And it had worked. I tried calling Daniel again, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "I saw that Melissa moved with you. I wish you both the best. I hope you'll include me in your life, even if it's just occasionally." 3 days passed before he responded. "Thanks. Things are crazy with the new job. We'll call when I can." He didn't call. Weeks went by and my phone stayed silent. I sent occasional texts. Nothing demanding, just little updates about my life. "The garden is doing well this year. Mrs. Henderson's cat had kittens. I joined a new book club and we're reading that mystery series you used to like." Sometimes he'd respond with a thumbs up emoji. Sometimes he wouldn't respond at all. I tried to move on with my life. I threw myself into my part-time job at the library, picked up extra shifts, joined a quilting group at church. Patricia invited me to a weekend trip to visit her daughter in Chicago, and I went, grateful for the distraction. But everywhere I went, I saw mothers and sons together. At restaurants, at parks, at the grocery store. and the knife of loss twisted deeper. The holidays approached, and I held out hope that Daniel would at least call on Thanksgiving. I set my phone next to me all day, checking it obsessively. At 8 p.m. I sent him a text. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. I'm grateful for you always." He responded the next morning. "Happy Thanksgiving." 2 words. That's what I got. Christmas was worse. I'd sent him a package in early December, worried about international shipping times. I'd included warm socks, his favorite cookies that I'd made and vacuum sealed, a photo album I'd put together of his childhood, and a heartfelt letter telling him how proud I was of him and how much I missed him. On Christmas Day he sent a text. "Got your package. Thanks." No phone call. No video chat. No acknowledgement of the love and effort I'd poured into his gifts. Just 3 words in silence. I spent Christmas alone in my house, eating leftover turkey and watching old movies, trying not to think about all the Christmases we'd spent together. The year he'd been 8 and insisted on making me breakfast in bed, which had resulted in burned toast and spilled orange juice and the sweetest intentions. The year he'd saved up his allowance to buy me a scarf because he'd noticed I was always cold. The year he'd come home from college and we'd stayed up until 2 a.m. talking and laughing and decorating cookies. Those memories felt like they belonged to a different person's life now. January came and with it my birthday. I didn't expect much, maybe a card, maybe a phone call. The day came and went with nothing. Not a text, not an email, nothing. He'd forgotten my birthday. Or worse, he'd remembered and chosen not to acknowledge it. That night, I sat in my darkened living room and had to face a truth I'd been avoiding. My son had cut me out of his life. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a final goodbye, but with slow, deliberate distance. He'd moved across the world and rebuilt his existence without me, and he'd done it so methodically that it had to be intentional. I cried that night in a way I hadn't cried since Tom died. The kind of crying that comes from deep in your chest and leaves you exhausted and hollow. I cried for the relationship I'd thought we had. I cried for the future I'd imagined. Being involved in his wedding, meeting grandchildren someday, growing old with family around me. I cried for the little boy who used to crawl into my lap and say, "You're my favorite person in the whole world, Mommy." That little boy was gone, replaced by a man who found me inconvenient. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a new determination. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for scraps of acknowledgement from someone who clearly didn't want to give them. I couldn't keep letting my happiness depend on a person who'd made it clear I wasn't a priority. I called Patricia and told her I needed to make some changes. "About time," she said. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I need to build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for my son to remember I exist." "I'm proud of you," Patricia said. "What's your first step?" I looked around my house, the house that held so many memories, both beautiful and painful. "I think I'm going to sell the house." The words surprised me even as I said them, but they felt right. This house had been my haven when Tom was alive, my sanctuary while raising Daniel. But now it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Every room held reminders of people who'd moved on without me. "Are you sure?" Patricia asked gently. "I'm sure," I said. "I think it's time for me to move on too." Over the next few weeks I started the process. I contacted a realtor, began sorting through decades of accumulated belongings, made decisions about what to keep and what to let go. It was exhausting both physically and emotionally, but it also felt liberating. For the first time in months I was taking action instead of just waiting and hoping. I didn't tell Daniel. If he could move across the world without telling me, I could sell my house without consulting him. Besides, what would he care? This hadn't been his home in years. He'd made that clear. The house sold faster than I expected. A young family with 2 small children fell in love with it immediately, and I was happy knowing that laughter and chaos would fill these rooms again. I bought a small condo in a 55-plus community about 20 miles away. A fresh start in a place with no memories attached. The day I signed the final papers on my house, I sent Daniel a text. "I sold the house. I'm moving to a condo in Riverside Heights next month." He called me 2 hours later. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in 3 months. "You sold the house?" He sounded shocked, almost accusatory. "Yes," I said calmly. "It was too big for just me, and I wanted a change." Mom, that's huge. Don't you think you should have discussed it with me first?" The irony wasn't lost on me. The way you discussed moving to Singapore with me? Silence on the other end. Daniel, I continued. You made it very clear that you need to live your life without keeping me informed. I'm extending you the same courtesy. That's different, he sputtered. This is the house I grew up in. This is our family home. It was our family home, I corrected. But you're building your life in Singapore now, and I need to build mine here. This house was full of memories that were making me sad. I need a fresh start. I can't believe you're doing this, he said, and he actually sounded hurt. Something inside me hardened. I can't believe you moved to another continent without telling me, but here we are. Mom, I have to go, I said. The movers are coming tomorrow and I have a lot to do. When can we talk about this? When you want to have an actual conversation instead of checking a box on your obligation list, you know where to find me. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt something I hadn't felt in months: power. For the first time since I'd received that misdirected card, I wasn't begging for my son's attention. I wasn't waiting for him to decide I was worth his time. I was making decisions for myself, and if he didn't like it, that was his problem, not mine. The move happened quickly. Patricia and her daughter helped me pack, along with some wonderful women from my quilting group who'd become fast friends. They made the process fun, bringing wine and stories and laughter into what could have been a sad transition. We packed up 35 years of life, and with each box I felt lighter. I didn't pack Daniel's childhood belongings. Instead, I boxed them separately and shipped them to Singapore. His Little League trophies, his elementary school artwork, his high school yearbooks, the baby blanket he dragged around until it was threadbare. All of it went into boxes marked Daniel's memories and sent across the world. If he wanted to keep them, he could. If he didn't, that was his choice. But I was done being the curator of a past he seemed eager to forget. My new condo was bright and modern, with big windows that let in lots of light. It was in a community full of active retirees, people who took fitness classes together, organized book clubs and game nights, went on group trips to wineries and museums. Within my first week, I'd been invited to 3 different social events. I met my neighbor Linda while we were both checking our mailboxes. She was 72, recently widowed, with a sharp sense of humor and an infectious laugh. You're going to love it here, she said. It's like college but with better wine and more naps. She introduced me to her friend group, 5 women who'd all moved to the community in the past few years, each with their own story of reinvention. There was Susan, whose husband had left her for a younger woman after 40 years of marriage. Margaret, whose adult children had scattered across the country and rarely visited. Diane, who'd spent her whole life caring for her disabled sister, and was now, at 68, learning how to live for herself. These women understood loss and disappointment in a way my old friends never quite had. They'd all had to rebuild their lives after foundations they'd thought were solid crumbled beneath them, and they'd all come out stronger. The best revenge is living well, Susan said one evening when we were all sharing wine on Linda's patio. She raised her glass. To second acts. To second acts, we all echoed. I didn't tell them the details of why I'd moved, not at first. I just said I'd wanted a change after my son moved abroad. But eventually, over time and wine and late-night conversations, the whole story came out. He forgot your birthday? Margaret said, outraged. Oh honey, no. That's not okay. My daughter did the same thing, Diane said quietly. Moved to Portland with her boyfriend, barely calls. It's like once they don't need us anymore, we just disappear. It's not right, Linda said firmly. These kids today, they think independence means cutting off the people who raised them. They don't understand that family isn't supposed to be something you outgrow. Their validation meant more than I could express. For months I'd wondered if Daniel was right, if I was too needy, too clingy, too much. But these women, who had no reason to placate me, who barely knew me, looked at my situation and saw exactly what it was. A son who'd failed his mother. Spring turned to summer, and I settled into my new life. I took up watercolor painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I joined a hiking group and discovered I actually enjoyed the physical challenge. I volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding joy in caring for creatures who gave affection freely and without conditions. Daniel texted occasionally, Bland updates about his job, generic questions about how I was doing. I responded politely but without the warmth and detail I used to provide. If he wanted to know how I was really doing, he could call. He could ask real questions. He could put in actual effort. He didn't. In August, 6 months after I'd moved, my phone rang with a video call from Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His face appeared on my screen, and I was struck by how different he looked. Older, more polished, his hair styled differently. He was wearing a button-down shirt that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Hey, Mom," he said, and there was something tentative in his voice. "Daniel," I said neutrally. "This is a surprise." "Yeah, I know I haven't called in a while. Things have been crazy." "They always are," I said. He winced. "Look, I wanted to talk to you about something. Melissa and I are getting married." The words should have hit me hard, but instead I felt strangely numb. Of course they were. They'd built a whole life together in Singapore, a life I wasn't part of. "Congratulations," I said. "When's the wedding?" "October 15th. We're having it here in Singapore. It's going to be small, just close friends and family." Close friends and family. I wondered if I still qualified as family in his mind. "I'd like you to come," he continued. "I know it's far, but it would mean a lot to have you there." Would it? Would it really mean a lot? Or was he just checking another box on his wedding obligation list? Mother invited, check. Mother's feelings considered, check. "I'll think about it," I said. He looked surprised. "You'll think about it? It's a long trip, Daniel. And expensive. And I'd need to arrange time off from work. So yes, I'll think about it." "Mom, it's my wedding." "I'm aware," I said calmly. "And I said I'll think about it. When do you need to know?" He looked frustrated. "Soon. We need a final head count for the venue." "I'll let you know by next week," I said. "Is there anything else?" He seemed thrown off balance. "I guess not. I just thought you'd be more excited." "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it in a distant kind of way. "I hope you and Melissa have a wonderful life together." "Are you mad at me?" he asked, and he actually sounded uncertain. "I'm not mad," I said honestly. "I'm just learning to respect your boundaries. You wanted space to build your life, so I'm giving you space. That's all. It feels like you're punishing me." "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." We looked at each other through the screen, thousands of miles apart in more ways than one. "I should go," I said. "I have plans this evening." "Plans?" He sounded surprised, as if he couldn't imagine me having a social life. "Yes, plans. I have friends here. We're going to a concert." "Oh," he said. "Okay. Well, let me know about the wedding." "I will. Goodbye, Daniel." I ended the call before he could say anything else. Linda found me sitting on my patio an hour later, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked, settling into the chair next to me. "Daniel's getting married," I said. "In Singapore. He wants me to come. Are you going to go?" I was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should. He's my son, it's his wedding. But another part of me thinks, why? Why should I fly 14 hours to attend a wedding for a life he deliberately built without me? Why should I spend thousands of dollars to be there for someone who couldn't even tell me he was moving?" "What does your gut say?" Linda asked. I closed my eyes and listened to what my heart was telling me. Underneath all the guilt and obligation and leftover hope that things could go back to how they used to be, my gut says he doesn't really want me there. He wants the idea of me there, the picture-perfect moment of the mother of the groom, the box check that says he's a good son, but he doesn't actually want to include me in his life. And I'm tired of pretending that's okay. "Then don't go," Linda said simply. "He's my son," I said weakly. "And you're his mother," Linda countered. "Did that stop him from moving without telling you? Did that stop him from forgetting your birthday? From going months without calling? Mary, you taught him how to walk, how to read, how to be a decent human being. You gave him everything you had. And he repaid you by treating you like an inconvenience. You don't owe him anything." Her words settled into me like stones into water, sinking deep and finding truth. The next day, I sent Daniel a text. "After careful consideration, I've decided not to attend your wedding. It's too far, too expensive, and honestly, I don't think my presence would add anything meaningful to your day. I wish you and Melissa all the happiness in the world. Perhaps we can celebrate together another time if you're ever back in the States." He called immediately. I didn't answer. He called again an hour later. I silenced my phone. Finally, he texted, "Mom, please pick up. We need to talk about this." I responded, "There's nothing to discuss. I've made my decision. Enjoy your wedding. You're being ridiculous. This is my wedding. And I'm sure it will be beautiful. Send pictures. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything I've done for you." That message made me laugh out loud. After everything he'd done for me? What exactly had he done for me? Been born? Allowed me the privilege of raising him? Graced me with occasional text messages? I didn't respond to that message. Or the next 5 that followed, each more accusatory than the last. Patricia called me that evening. "I heard about the wedding. How are you doing?" "I'm okay," I said, and I was surprised to realize it was true. I actually feel relieved. Like I finally stopped waiting for him to become the son I thought he was. "What if he never comes around?" Patricia asked gently. "What if this damages your relationship permanently?" "Then at least I'll know," I said. "I'll know that the relationship I was mourning never really existed in the first place. And I can stop grieving something I never actually had." The weeks leading up to Daniel's wedding were peaceful. He didn't call, didn't text. I assumed Melissa was furious. I could imagine her ranting about the rude mother-in-law who couldn't even be bothered to attend her only son's wedding. Let her rant. She'd won anyway. She'd gotten Daniel all to herself, exactly as she wanted. On October 15th, the day of Daniel's wedding, I went to the animal shelter and spent the afternoon walking dogs. Then I came home, made myself a nice dinner, poured a glass of wine, and watched the sunset from my patio. My phone stayed silent. No photos, no updates, no acknowledgement that I existed. "To second acts," I said, raising my glass to the empty air. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. November came, and with it Thanksgiving again. Linda invited me to join her extended family celebration, but I declined. Instead, I accepted an invitation from Margaret to join a group trip to a bed and breakfast in Vermont. 6 of us from the community went together, and we spent the long weekend hiking, eating too much, playing board games, and laughing until our sides hurt. On Thanksgiving Day, Daniel sent me a text. "Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're well." I didn't respond until the next day. "Happy Thanksgiving to you too. I'm doing very well." December arrived, and Christmas decorations went up throughout the community. Linda and I hosted a holiday party in the community clubhouse, and over 50 people showed up. We played ugly sweater bingo, had a cookie exchange, and sang carols with more enthusiasm than skill. I sent Daniel a Christmas card. Nothing personal, just a generic season's greetings with my signature. I didn't send gifts. I didn't send a long letter. I didn't send cookies or photos or any of the loving touches I used to include. He sent me a card too, with a photo of him and Melissa in front of a Christmas tree. They looked happy, polished and perfect and happy. Good for them, I thought, and meant it. I wanted him to be happy. I just didn't want to keep sacrificing my own happiness in the process. January brought my birthday again. This year, I didn't spend it waiting for my son to remember. Instead, Linda threw me a surprise party, and 20 of my new friends showed up with cake and presents and ridiculous decorations. We danced to music from the 70s, told embarrassing stories, and stayed up way too late. It was hands down one of the best birthdays I'd ever had. At midnight, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up the remnants of the party, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry I missed the actual day, time zones are confusing. Hope you had a good one." I looked at the message for a long time, feeling nothing but a mild, distant sadness for what could have been. I didn't respond. February brought a surprise. A phone call from Melissa. "Mary." Her voice was clipped, professional. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "About you missing our wedding. About you ignoring Daniel's attempts to reach out. About whatever this punishment campaign is." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said calmly. "I'm just living my life." "You're hurting Daniel," she said. He's been really upset about the distance between you two. Then he should call me, I said. He should have a real conversation instead of sending obligatory text messages. He should act like I'm his mother instead of an item on his to-do list. He has been trying. Has he? I interrupted. Because from where I'm sitting, he's been doing the bare minimum to avoid feeling guilty. There's a difference between trying and pretending to try. You're being unreasonable, Melissa said, her voice hardening. Daniel moved to advance his career. That's what adults do. They make choices for themselves, not based on what will make their mothers happy. You're absolutely right, I agreed. And I'm making choices for myself too. I'm choosing not to spend my energy on a relationship where I'm the only one investing. I'm choosing not to wait by the phone for calls that never come. I'm choosing to build a life that makes me happy instead of one that revolves around being available for a son who doesn't actually want me around. That's not, Melissa started, but I continued. Did he tell you he forgot my birthday last year? Did he mention that I found out about your move from a misdirected card? Did he explain that he went 6 months without telling me he was leaving the country? Silence on the other end. I didn't think so, I said. Melissa, I appreciate you calling, but Daniel is a grown man. If he has something to say to me, he can say it himself. I'm done being the villain in whatever story you two have created about the overbearing mother. I loved my son with everything I had, and he chose to walk away. That was his choice. Now I'm making mine. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Confrontation still wasn't my strong suit, but I felt proud of myself. For years, I'd been so worried about being seen as difficult or demanding. I'd bent over backward to be accommodating, to not ask for too much, to make myself small and unobtrusive. And where had it gotten me? To a place where even my basic desire to know about my son's life was considered unreasonable. Well, no more. March brought spring and with it unexpected news. Patricia called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. Mary, you'll never guess what happened. What? My daughter Angela is pregnant. I'm going to be a grandmother. I was genuinely happy for her, even as a small part of me wondered if I'd ever have that experience. Daniel and Melissa had been married for 5 months now. Would they have children? Would I even know if they did? That's wonderful, I said, pushing the thoughts away. When is she due? As Patricia chattered about nursery themes and baby names, I realized something important. I couldn't keep measuring my life against milestones that might never come. I couldn't keep waiting for a future that involved grandchildren and family holidays, and the close-knit family structure I'd always imagined. That future might not exist. And if I kept waiting for it, I'd miss the life I actually had. So I stopped waiting. I threw myself into living. I took a 2-week trip to Italy with a tour group from the community. I started volunteering at a literacy center, teaching adults how to read. I adopted a senior dog from the shelter, a sweet, graying golden retriever named Buddy who'd been overlooked for younger, more energetic dogs. He became my constant companion, greeting me with genuine joy every time I came home. I didn't think about Daniel constantly anymore. Sometimes whole days would go by without him crossing my mind, and when he did, it was with a sense of distant regret, like thinking about an old friend I'd lost touch with. The sharp pain had dulled to a mild ache, and even that was fading. In May, more than a year after I'd moved to my condo, Daniel called. Not texted, actually called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Mom, he said, and his voice sounded strange. Strained. We need to talk. About what? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. About us. About everything. Okay, I said. I'm listening. There was a long pause. Can we do this in person? I'm going to be in the States next month for a business conference. I could drive out to see you. If you want, I said. But Daniel, if this is just about you feeling guilty, don't bother. I'm fine. I've moved on. You don't need to make a grand gesture to absolve yourself. It's not. He sounded frustrated. Mom, can I come see you or not? You can come, I said. But I'm not making any promises about what kind of conversation we'll have. Fair enough, he said quietly. I'll text you when I know the exact dates. He hung up and I stared at my phone, unsure what to feel. Part of me hoped this would be a breakthrough, that he'd finally understand what he'd done and we could start rebuilding. But another part of me, the part that had learned hard lessons over the past year, knew better than to get my hopes up. Linda found me sitting on my patio later that evening. "You look pensive," she said. "Daniel's coming to visit next month," I told her. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I don't know. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even really hurt. I'm just wary. Like I'm waiting to see what he actually wants." "Trust your instincts," Linda said. "You've done good work this past year, building a life that makes you happy. Don't let him undo that unless he's serious about being part of it in a real way." "What if he is serious?" I asked. "What if he genuinely wants to fix things?" "Then you'll deal with that when it happens," Linda said wisely. "But Mary, let me ask you something. If he never came around, if things stayed exactly as they are right now, would you be okay?" I thought about my life, my friends, my volunteer work, my cozy condo, my beloved dog, my painting classes and hiking trips and book club meetings. I thought about the woman I'd become over the past year, someone stronger and more independent than I'd ever been. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I think I would be." "Then you've already won," Linda said. "Everything else is just details." June arrived, and with it, Daniel's visit. He'd texted me the details. He'd be driving out on a Saturday afternoon, wanted to take me to dinner. I suggested a restaurant near my condo. Nothing fancy, but with good food and a quiet atmosphere for talking. I spent the morning of his visit feeling strangely calm. I cleaned my already clean condo more out of habit than necessity, took Buddy for a long walk, and got ready without the nervous energy I might have felt a year ago. I put on a sundress, simple jewelry, minimal makeup. I wasn't trying to prove anything or present a particular image. I was just myself. When the doorbell rang at exactly 3 p.m., I took a deep breath and answered it. Daniel stood on my doorstep, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He looked tired, I realized. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and something about his posture seemed less confident than I remembered. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hello, Daniel," I said. "Come in." He followed me inside, looking around the condo with obvious curiosity. His eyes landed on the photos on my wall, pictures from my Italy trip, photos of me with Linda and the other women from the community, a framed picture of Buddy and me at the dog park. "You've really built a life here," he said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite identify. "I have," I said simply. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Iced tea?" "Water would be great." I poured us both glasses and we sat in my living room, the silence stretching between us. Buddy ambled over and sniffed Daniel's hand before settling at my feet. "When did you get a dog?" Daniel asked. "Last March. His name is Buddy. He's 12 and nobody wanted to adopt a senior dog, so I did." Daniel nodded, petting Buddy's head absently. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: genuine uncertainty. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "A real one." I waited, saying nothing. "I handled everything wrong," he continued, the words coming faster now. "The move, the wedding, all of it. I was selfish and cowardly, and I hurt you badly. And then when you stopped reaching out, when you didn't come to the wedding, I was angry at first. I thought you were being petty, trying to punish me." He paused, looking down at his hands. "But Melissa and I have been in therapy," he said, surprising me. "We were having problems, and the therapist asked us to trace back when things started feeling off between us. And I realized it was right after the wedding, because you weren't there and everyone asked about it, and I had to keep explaining that my mom couldn't make it. And every time I said it, I felt this weight, this guilt." He looked up at me and I saw tears in his eyes. "So I talked about it in therapy. About you, about our relationship, about how things fell apart. And the therapist asked me to really think about the timeline, about what I'd done and how I treated you. And when I laid it all out, Mom, I was horrified. Moving without telling you, forgetting your birthday, all those months of barely calling. When I said it all out loud, I sounded like a terrible person." "You're not a terrible person," I said quietly. "You're a person who made some hurtful choices." "The therapist said something that really stuck with me," Daniel said. "She said that sometimes we treat the people who love us most like they're guaranteed, like their love is unconditional and permanent, so we don't have to maintain it. We put all our energy into other relationships, romantic partners, friends, colleagues, because those feel more fragile, like they require work. But the people who've always been there? We take them for granted. He wiped at his eyes. That's what I did to you. I took you for granted. I assumed you'd always be there, always love me, always forgive me. So I didn't put in effort. I didn't think about your feelings. I just expected you to understand and accept whatever I decided to do. I felt my own eyes getting misty, but I held steady. Why did you do it, Daniel? Why did you move without telling me? He was quiet for a long moment. Because Melissa said you'd try to talk me out of it. She said you'd make it about you, guilt-trip me, make me feel bad for leaving. And I didn't want to deal with that. I wanted to make this big, exciting change without anyone questioning it or complicating it. So I just didn't tell you. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked. I don't know what I thought, he admitted. I wasn't thinking beyond my own convenience. That's the truth. It was easier not to tell you, so I didn't. And the wedding? Same thing, he said, shame coloring his voice. I invited you because I felt like I had to, but I didn't actually think about what it would be like for you. Flying 14 hours, being surrounded by people you don't know in a country you've never been to. For a wedding to a woman who's never exactly been warm to you. I didn't think about your experience at all. I just thought about how it would look if my mom wasn't there. And when I said I wasn't coming, I was furious, he said honestly, because you were messing up the picture I'd created. You were supposed to be the supportive mom who shows up no matter what, who forgives everything, who's always there. And you weren't. You set a boundary. And I hated it because it meant I had to face what I'd done. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Daniel said finally. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did and I'm ashamed of it. And I'm working on being better. Not just with you but in general. With Melissa, with my friends, with everyone. How are things with Melissa? I asked. He sighed. Complicated. The therapy is helping, but we've got a lot to work through. Moving to Singapore was supposed to fix our problems, but it turns out you can't run away from your issues. They just follow you. That's true, I said softly. The thing is, Daniel said, looking at me with something like desperation, I don't want to be the kind of person who throws away the most important relationship in his life because it's inconvenient. I don't want to be the guy who treats his mother like garbage and then wonders why he's unhappy. I want to fix this. If you'll let me. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw both the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. He'd hurt me deeply, and that pain had changed our relationship in ways that couldn't be undone. But he was here, genuinely remorseful, asking for a chance to do better. I can't go back to the way things were, I said carefully. That version of our relationship is gone. I spent too much time waiting for you to value me, and I'm not doing that anymore. I have a good life now, Daniel. I have friends and activities and purpose. I'm not going to give that up to go back to being the mother who's always available, always understanding, always putting her son first no matter how he treats her. He nodded, looking like he'd expected this. But, I continued, I'm open to building something new. A relationship between two adults who respect each other, who communicate honestly, who make time for each other because they want to, not out of obligation. But that requires effort from both of us. Real effort, not just occasional text messages. I want that, Daniel said immediately. I really do, Mom. I want to be better. I want to earn back your trust. It's going to take time, I warned him. I know. And I'm going to have boundaries now. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine when it's not. I'm not going to make excuses for you or let things slide. If you hurt me, I'm going to tell you. I understand. And, I said, my voice firm, if Melissa has a problem with me or with our relationship, you need to handle that. I'm not going to be the scapegoat for problems in your marriage. You're an adult, and you need to be able to maintain relationships with people besides your wife. Something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe guilt. You're right. That's fair. Melissa and I need to work on our own issues. I shouldn't have let her influence how I treated you. I appreciate you saying that, I said. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So where do we start? How do we rebuild this? Honestly, I said. We start small. Regular phone calls, not texts, actual conversations. You tell me what's really going on in your life, and I'll tell you about mine. We don't make promises we can't keep. We don't pretend everything is perfect. We just show up for each other. Consistently. I can do that, he said. I want to do that. And if you can't make a call, you tell me ahead of time. If something big happens in your life, I want to hear it from you, not from social media or a misdirected card. Can you commit to that? Yes, he said firmly. I can. I will. I nodded slowly. Then we have a starting point. We talked for another hour about smaller things, his job, my volunteer work, Buddy's antics, the friends I'd made in the community. It felt tentative, careful, like we were both learning how to talk to each other again. But it also felt genuine in a way our conversations hadn't felt in years. When it was time for dinner, we drove to the restaurant together. Over pasta and wine, Daniel told me more about therapy, about the realizations he'd been having, about the work he was doing to be more present and aware. The therapist asked me what I was afraid of, he said. When it came to you, I mean. And I realized I was afraid of disappointing you. You sacrificed so much for me, and I felt like I could never live up to that. So instead of trying, I just pulled away. If I kept you at a distance, you couldn't see all the ways I was failing to be the son you deserved. Daniel, I said gently, I never expected you to be perfect. I just wanted you to include me in your life. That's all. I know that now, he said. But back then in my head, everything was tied up with guilt and obligation and Melissa telling me I was too dependent on you. It became easier to just avoid it all. How does Melissa feel about you being here? I asked. He hesitated. She wasn't thrilled. She thinks I'm wasting my time, that you're manipulating me by withdrawing. But I told her that whether or not we work things out with you, I need to try. This isn't about her. It's about me and my relationship with my mother. That must have been a difficult conversation, I said. It was, he admitted. But it needed to happen. The therapist has been helping us understand that we're both bringing baggage from our families into our marriage. Melissa's parents were cold and distant. They never showed affection or approval. So she learned to see family relationships as transactional. You do things for people because it benefits you, not because you love them. She doesn't understand the kind of relationship we had, because she never experienced it herself. That's sad, I said, and I meant it. It is, Daniel agreed. But it's also not an excuse for how I treated you. I made my own choices. I let her perspective overshadow my own feelings, and that was wrong. We finished dinner and drove back to my condo. At my door, Daniel pulled me into a hug. A real one. Not the stiff, obligatory hugs he'd given me in recent years. Thank you for giving me a chance, he said into my hair. I know I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to do better, I said. But Daniel, this is your one chance. If you slip back into old patterns, if you disappear again, I'm not going to chase you. I've built a good life here, and I'm not going back to that place of waiting and hoping and hurting. Do you understand? I understand, he said. I won't let you down. Not this time. He left and I went inside, emotionally exhausted but cautiously hopeful. Buddy greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, and I sat on the floor with him, scratching behind his ears. What do you think, Buddy? I asked. Did I do the right thing? He licked my face, which I took as a yes. Over the next few months, Daniel kept his word. He called every Sunday evening, and we'd talk for an hour or more. He told me about his projects at work, about the challenges in his marriage, about his thoughts on therapy. I told him about my painting classes, about the trip Patricia and I were planning to Maine, about the memoir writing group I joined. The conversations felt different than they used to. More equal somehow. I wasn't just the audience for his life. He was genuinely interested in mine. He asked follow-up questions about my friends, remembered details from previous conversations, sent me articles about topics I'd mentioned enjoying. For my birthday in January, he video called me first thing in the morning Singapore time, which meant staying up late for him. We talked for 2 hours and at the end he said, I'm sorry I forgot last year. That was inexcusable. I have a reminder set now so it will never happen again. It was such a small thing but it meant the world. In March he called with big news. Melissa and I are separating, he said, and his voice was heavy with emotion. We've been trying to make it work, but we're fundamentally incompatible. The therapist has been helping us see that. We want different things, we have different values, and we've been making each other miserable trying to force something that isn't there. I'm sorry, I said, and I know that must be hard. It is, he said. But it also feels right. We're being civil about it. She's staying in Singapore and I'm thinking about coming back to the States. My heart jumped, but I kept my voice neutral. Really? Yeah. The company has a position opening up in Boston. It's a lateral move, not a promotion. But I'm realizing that career advancement isn't everything. I miss home, Mom. I miss being able to drive to see you instead of having to plan international trips. I miss American coffee and baseball, and knowing what people are talking about when they reference TV shows. Boston is still far from here, I pointed out. It's a 5-hour drive, he said. That's nothing compared to 14 hours on a plane. I could come visit on long weekends. You could come visit me. We could actually have a relationship again. If that's what you want, I said carefully, then I think it's wonderful. But Daniel, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't come back just to fix things with me. Come back because it's what you want for your life. It is what I want, he said firmly. I've spent 2 years chasing this idea of success, the prestigious job, the exciting international location, the power couple lifestyle. And I've been miserable the whole time. I want to come home. I want to rebuild my life in a way that actually makes me happy instead of just looking impressive on paper. Then I support you completely, I said. In May, Daniel moved back to the States. He drove out to visit me before he even fully unpacked his new apartment in Boston, and this time the visit felt completely different. He seemed lighter, more like the son I remembered from years ago. We spent the weekend together and he met my friends. Linda took an immediate liking to him, and after dinner at her place, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. That's a good man, she said. He made mistakes, but he's doing the work to fix them. That's rare. I know, I said. You did good, Mary, Linda said. Standing your ground, refusing to accept less than you deserved, that took courage. And look at the result. You didn't just get your son back. You got a better relationship than you had before. She was right. What Daniel and I had now was healthier than what we'd had when he was younger. Back then, our relationship had been built on unequal ground, me giving, him taking, both of us accepting that dynamic as normal. Now we were building something based on mutual respect and genuine desire to be in each other's lives. In June, Daniel called me on a Wednesday evening, outside our usual Sunday schedule. Is everything okay? I asked, slightly alarmed by the change in routine. Everything's fine, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I just wanted to talk to you. I had a good day at work, and I was thinking about you, so I called. Is that okay? Of course it's okay, I said, warmth flooding through me. Tell me about your day. We talked for 45 minutes about nothing particularly important, just the small details of daily life. And as we talked, I realized this was what I'd wanted all along. Not grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but simple, consistent presence. The knowledge that I mattered enough for him to pick up the phone just because he was thinking of me. In August, Daniel asked if he could bring someone to meet me. Her name is Rachel, he said. We met at a community service project. She's a social worker and she's really special, Mom. I think you'll like her. I'd love to meet her, I said. Rachel turned out to be warm, genuine, and completely different from Melissa. She asked me questions about my life with real interest, admired my watercolor paintings, and spent 20 minutes playing fetch with Buddy in the backyard. At dinner, she told a story about her own mother, and the love in her voice was unmistakable. Family is everything to me, she said. My parents are still together after 40 years, and I'm close with my siblings. That's what I want in my life. Those deep, lasting connections. Daniel looked at me over the table, and something passed between us. An acknowledgement, maybe, or an understanding. He'd found someone who valued the same things I'd tried to teach him. After Rachel and Daniel left, Linda came over for our usual evening wine. She's lovely, Linda said. Night and day from the pictures you showed me of that Melissa woman. She really is, I agreed. You know what I love about this whole story? Linda said. You could have stayed bitter. You could have frozen Daniel out completely, made him grovel for years, held onto your hurt like a weapon. But you didn't. You set boundaries, protected yourself, built a new life, and then when he genuinely changed, you let him back in. That's real strength. I almost didn't, I admitted. Part of me wanted to stay closed off, to protect myself from being hurt again. But you didn't, Linda repeated. Because you're brave enough to be vulnerable again. That's the whole ballgame right there. In October, 2 years after I'd received that misdirected farewell card, Daniel and Rachel drove out to celebrate my birthday with me. They'd brought an elaborate cake from a bakery in Boston, and Daniel had made a photo album of the past year, pictures of our visits, screenshots of our video calls, candid shots from various adventures we'd each been on. I wanted to show you, he said, that I'm paying attention now, that I see you and I value you, and I'm committed to keeping you in my life. Cried, of course. Happy tears this time. We had dinner with all my friends from the community, Linda, Margaret, Susan, Diane, and several others who'd become my family over the past 2 years. We ate too much, laughed too loud, and stayed up way too late. Rachel fit right in, swapping stories with Margaret about terrible ex-boyfriends, and bonding with Susan over their shared love of true crime podcasts. At one point, I looked around my living room at all these people. My son, his girlfriend, my friends, my dog, and felt overwhelmingly grateful. Not for the pain I'd gone through, but for what it had taught me. That I was stronger than I'd thought. That I could build a life that sustained me, even when the people I loved most let me down. That setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary. That love without respect wasn't really love at all. 2 years ago, I'd been a woman who found out her son moved across the world from a misdirected card. I'd been devastated, lost, questioning everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my child. Now I was a woman who'd rebuilt her life from the ground up. I had a community that valued me, hobbies that fulfilled me, and a sense of self that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. And I had a son who'd learned through hard lessons what really mattered. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of crying, months of uncertainty, moments when I'd questioned every choice I'd made. But I'd come through it stronger, clearer, more certain of who I was and what I deserved. As everyone was leaving, Daniel hung back, helping me clean up while Rachel loaded leftovers into their car. "Mom," he said quietly, "I just want you to know that I see the difference in you. You're happier now. More confident. More too." "I am," I agreed. "Losing you forced me to find myself." "That sounds dramatic, but it's true." "I'm sorry it took that," he said. "I'm sorry you had to go through that pain because of me." "I'm not," I said, surprising both of us, "because the woman I am now is someone I'm proud to be." If things hadn't fallen apart, I might have spent the rest of my life being defined by my relationship with you instead of knowing who I am on my own. He hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you too, Mom. For all of it." After they left, I sat on my patio with a cup of tea, Buddy at my feet, and watched the stars come out. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Made it back safely. Love you. Talk Sunday." "Love you too," I typed back. Sunday sounds perfect. And it did. Because Sunday wasn't just an obligation anymore, or a desperate attempt to maintain connection. It was a genuine desire to talk to each other, to share our lives, to be present for one another. I thought about the farewell card that had started everything, that cream-colored envelope that had shattered my world. At the time, it had felt like the worst thing that could have happened. A betrayal so complete that I hadn't known how to process it. But maybe it had been the best thing. Maybe I'd needed to lose everything to discover what I was capable of building on my own. Maybe Daniel had needed to lose me to understand what he was taking for granted. Maybe we both needed to fall apart so we could come back together as whole, healthy people instead of one giving and one taking until there was nothing left. The universe has a strange way of teaching lessons. Sometimes the worst moments become the catalysts for the best transformations. Sometimes you have to be broken before you can be truly whole. I finished my tea and stood, Buddy stretching beside me. Tomorrow I had a painting class in the morning and lunch with Linda in the afternoon. Next week I was volunteering at the Literacy Center and attending Margaret's granddaughter's recital. Next month I had a trip to Arizona planned with the hiking group. My life was full. Not because my son had come back into it, but because I'd filled it with purpose and connection and joy. Daniel was a wonderful addition to that life, but he wasn't the foundation of it anymore. And that made all the difference. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd stood in this same spot 2 years ago, devastated and confused and questioning everything. That woman had been lost, defining herself entirely through her relationship with her son. This woman, the one in the mirror now, knew who she was. She was strong, independent, surrounded by love and clear about her worth. She'd survived abandonment and rebuilt herself into someone even better than before. I smiled at my reflection. The journey from that misdirected farewell card to this moment hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks and doubts and moments when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But every choice I'd made, to move, to set boundaries, to build a new life, to let Daniel back in when he proved he'd changed, had led me here. To a place of peace, of wholeness, of quiet, steady happiness that didn't depend on anyone else's choices. My son had moved across the world without telling me. And in the wreckage of that betrayal, I'd discovered something precious myself. That, I thought as I climbed into bed with Buddy curling up at my feet, was the real ending to this story. Not the reconciliation with Daniel, as lovely as that was, but the reconciliation with myself. The discovery that I was enough, all on my own, and that any relationships I chose to maintain had to enhance the life I'd built, not define it. I fell asleep smiling, grateful for the journey, grateful for the lessons, and most of all grateful for the woman I'd become. The woman who'd been strong enough to let go, wise enough to rebuild, and brave enough to try again when the time was right. That was the real triumph. And no one, not even my son, could take that away from me.